Hey folks, welcome back to our Dice Tower preview. I'm Mark, and today we're taking a look at the Scare Factory. The Scare Factory is brought to you by Supar Games. It's for 1 to 4 players, ages 8 and up, and games range anywhere from 90 to 120 minutes. In the Scare Factory, players will take the role of different monsters that find their home within the Scare Factory, a mysterious and magical place deep within the earth that produces the many scare objects and entities for monsters to have in their everyday lives. The monsters' lives are interrupted, however, by humans who have been digging deeper into the earth. They discover the Scare Factory and decide that they will take it for themselves. They will use it for their own profit and strip away everything that makes the factory unique in order to avoid losing their way of life. The monsters will have to fight back. Will you be able to stop the humans and scare them away? The players win if the boss runs out of boss cards. Cards are hit points in this game. The boss wins if the players run out of player cards or the boss gets to the vault room. So to set this one up, you're going to be taking the Omen cards. You're going to be shuffling up those cards and drawing a number based on the number of players in the game. These cards, you'll add up all their totals, and that's the number of assets you're going to need to build out and start the game. Now, one of the main things is that you need room tiles to build out your Scare Factory, and you're going to build them all off of the vault. The vault is going to start with ward and scare tokens in the vault, but you're going to build out these pathways, and you're going to be placing at the end of those pathways the different spawn points for the boss and for the martial minions and the mystic minions. And then you have special tiles for your characters, their start tiles. But you're going to build all that out, and these cards will outline that for you, as well as how many of the different minions between the martial and the mystic. This will show you how many of those need to be put into their spawn rooms. And then finally, how many boss cards you need. Boss cards are related directly to health for the boss. And of course, throughout the game, those boss cards are going to do all kinds of nasty things, but you'll take those cards and shuffle them up and place them face down equally at the bottom of the boss board. So you'll take the boss figure and place it on the level 3 position of the boss tracker. Now the boss tracker is a way to do a difficulty level set in the game as well, but level 3 is considered normal. And he'll be inching ever closer to the U so we can spawn to the Scare Factory and try to find your vault. Each player is going to get their own character. You get a player board, a deck of cards, and a figure. The figures are going to be placed out in the Scare Factory in their particular rooms. You'll take your deck of cards, you'll shuffle those up and place 3 at the bottom of your player board. These cards are also kind of representative of your health, so you don't want to blow through them too quickly in the game, or potentially you could be losing them in other ways. Now, also there's a series of dice that are going to be helping the minions as well as you when you do battles and as they move and so forth. There's also extra tiles in the game that are going to allow you to unlock other areas of the Scare Factory. All right, so let's jump in and take a look at how some of this plays. Now, one of the big things you're trying to do here as the players is get enough scare tokens put out into the factory so when the minions and the boss move into areas, these scare tokens are activated and then will be directly affecting the boss later in the round. But the rounds are really divided up into like a villain phase and a character or player phase. And in that villain phase, you've got like the haunting, which is really going on with the minions before the boss comes into play. But once the boss comes into play, you have a reaping phase where their cards will start to be revealed and doing all kinds of nasty things in the Scare Factory. But initially, you're just going to be activating these villains and you're going to be rolling their corresponding dice. Each of the dice have the colors of the different doors in the Scare Factory. So if you roll a red, then the minions of that type will try to move through a red door. If that door goes nowhere, they don't move. Now there's also a wild, and you as the players get to choose what color door they pass through when you roll that. There's also an investigate. And what's interesting about investigate is that they will always move then one space towards the nearest player. And when they investigate, if there happens to be scare tokens in the room that they move to, they can just discard that token because they were more careful this time. But initially, when they move into a room that has scare tokens and they weren't being careful, then they do get frightened and you roll the scare dice to see where they move or run to. And potentially they could just run away based on what the results of that dice are. But there's also a chance that you've placed enough scare tokens in corresponding or connecting rooms that you create a chain. So as they run away, they run into another scare token, and then they run into another. And if they do this 3 times, then they run away from the scare factory altogether. Now, as each of the minions and boss encounter a scare token that they have to deal with, those scare tokens are placed to the side for later use in the round. So you have 2 different types of enemies in this game. You have the martial minions and you have the mystical minions. Under that martial list, you've got the detective, the ghost hunter, and the outlaw. And under the mystical list, you've got the fortune teller, you've got the necromancer, and you have the witch. Now, villains can attack. If they happen to move into a room and they're not scared, there's no scare tokens, and you happen to be there, one of the characters or players at the table, then they get to roll an attack dice. Potentially they can miss altogether, or they could hit you and you lose 1 of your cards, or they get a critical and you lose 2 of your cards, knowing that cards, again, in this game are your health. Now, you as the characters, if you're moving and you move into a room with an enemy, they get to attack then as well. So all things to keep in mind as you're navigating the scare factory. Now, the big thing you're trying to do as the players is put scare tokens out into the world. And to get those tokens initially anyway, you should go to the vault and pick up 1 of each. Now, you might have cards that give you consumables to get you more tokens as well. But in general, you can get tokens in the vault and start to prep them and place them out into the factory. Now, there's 2 different types. You have scare and several different types of scare, but those scares are all going to relate back to the different health levels of the boss. Now, there's blue tokens called ward tokens, and they will temporarily shut down a doorway when enemies try to move through them. But you need these tokens. So the basics of what you're doing on your turn are movement. Each of the characters have different movement. And you're going to be placing tokens, obviously, and different steps you'll see with each of the characters will show what they can do per room and so forth. But in a room, they can place a ward token, they potentially can place scare tokens or both or any combination. But you'll be placing those out and working with your fellow players to strategically place them in the right places. And you will also have, again, your cards that you can activate at the bottom of your board, doing all kinds of different things. We'll take a look at those in a minute. And you have a special ability, but you can only do that once per turn. Or you might unlock a new area of the scare factory. And if you do, you're going to pull a new tile and place it to the edge. But that also means that will end your turn immediately. So all your cards act as health. So keep that in mind as you use them and discard them. Now, there's 3 different types, really. First, we have repeatable. Here we have freezer burn. And what's fun is that the cards are pretty thematic to the different characters. But freezer burn is a repeatable card, which means you can use its ability, but it doesn't get discarded. And you also have passive cards. As long as this card is on the top of that particular slot on your player board, then you can use its passive ability and it can just stay in play. And then you have consumables. In this case, we have creaky floorboards, which is going to give you additional tokens, scare tokens to use throughout the factory. Now, obviously, it's a consumable, so you use it and it gets discarded, remembering that this is also health. So at the end of a turn, the boss will move down 1 slot ever closer to being released into the factory. And then you're going to pull spawn cards based on the number of players in the game. You'll flip those over and place new minions out into the world. Now, if there's ever more than 5 minions in a spot, then they'll move and investigate, just like rolling on the dice. So potentially they could get rid of scare tokens that way and moving ever closer to one of the players. And then finally, you're going to be using those scare tokens that have been accumulating, and you're going to pull cards into your player boards based on the number of tokens. So you have to work together with your fellow players to determine who gets cards and so forth. But those icons on the top of the scare tokens directly relate to the boss cards and the boss level of health. So you're looking at the different locations of cards on the boss board, and for every icon that you have in scare tokens, you'll pull a card away from the boss, reducing their health. So as you move through the rounds, the boss will get ever closer to spawning to the factory. And once he's in play, he will always get to move before the other enemies. Now, what's important about the boss is that he still has to deal with scare tokens along the way, but he never truly just flees the facility. So remember, his goal though is to make it to the vault room and stop the players. So the thing about him though that's really bad is the reapening. Each of his cards flip over in the different categories here and they resolve. Things like spawning more enemies to the board, or they might cause the boss to move additional movement if an enemy is removed, things like that, or it might cause the enemies to investigate, removing some of your scare tokens from the board. So there's all kinds of things these cards can do, which then really comes into play why you might play some of the scare tokens with the different icons at different locations, because those icons are going to directly relate to the cards that are in play now. So you might just need to shut down a deck, and if you have multiples of that type, then you'll remove every card from that slot. But if there's any cards left after removing, then that next card is flipped and goes into play and is active. So the boss is particularly bad, and you really do have to band together to shut him down. It is a race against time. All right, folks, just a reminder once again, this has been a Dice Tower paid preview, and everything you've seen here has been in prototype form. So keep a close eye on the campaign for any changes that still may occur. Now, with that said, this game is super thematic, and it is truly a cooperative experience. And as things ramp up, you really do have to work hard to keep these enemies at bay. Putting those scare tokens out is crucial. Using your special abilities of your different characters really comes into play. But folks, ultimately, if this looks like something that would be of interest to you, I'm sure they'd appreciate your support. So I think that's it from me, and until next time, we'll see you at the table.